Join Lizzie Rose, Tahil Gesyuk, and Gabriel llhewellyn-ari as they come together to enlighten all sexual identities and shift the partnership paradigm. Welcome to Revolutionary Romance.
And welcome to another wonderful episode of Revolutionary Romance, where we, in each and every episode, are shifting the partnership paradigm, bringing you enlightening and empowering information for you to really change yourself and all the relationships in your life. My name is Gabriel llhewellyn-ari, and I am joined here today by the embodied relationship and intimacy coach, Tahil Gesyuk. And our show today is on secrecy and transparency, so definitely stay tuned. But before we begin, I just wanna say a big thank you to all of our listeners who listened to our last show, The Nirvana of Self-Love, and who tuned in. Thank you so much. We wouldn't really be completing the mission of this show if you didn't listen. So thank you so much for listening. And we are about to get started. So Tahil, do you want to say hello to everyone?
Yeah, I want to also echo with what you just said. You know, we are two men that are authentically committed to bringing the light into some of the dark and scary places that you might have around relationship, around connection. We know what it feels like to be isolated and alone, and trying to have that nourishment and connection in your life and having a hard time finding it. We're doing this show as a way of supporting people who might not have the support wherever you might be. And we really authentically do appreciate your feedback. We are two people that really listen to what you have to say if you send us an email or access us in any way, because our shows are organically based. You know, we have a loose structure, but aside from that, we just kind of wing it to the point of speaking to the present moment as it unfolds. We live this stuff that we talk about. We don't just say it. It's not just information for us. It's a way of life. And we invite you to kind of share the journey and adventure with us. So thank you for tuning in and for listening to us.
Yes. And so if you haven't listened to the show before, the way that we always start our show is with an opening circle. So and what that is we basically each of us will say two things that we want to let go of, two ways of being, I guess you could say, and two things we'd like to call in. And we also invite you to do that right along with us. So why don't we go ahead and get started? Tahil, do you want to begin?
Sure. First, I invite the audience along with us to take a deep breath in and let it go with a deep sigh. All right, so what am I letting go of? I'm letting go of being a little groggy and a little spacey from this morning, and I let go of any kind of tension or worry, and I bring in presence, grace, and the wisdom to be clear.
And I let go of rushing. Let go of the fear or the fear of not being enough and needing to prove something. And I call in me. Just me. Without a mask. Just me and self-love and transparency.
Great.
So, our show today is on, just like I told you a few minutes ago, secrecy and transparency. So, Tahil,
Yes.
what is secrecy? What is transparency? Most of us know what those words mean, but what do they mean in this context? And
All right. So, as a relationship and intimacy coach for over a decade now, one of the things that I found clashing, and by the way, when I talk about masculine and feminine, it's a generality. There's always exceptions to the rule. I'm talking about culture right now. There's many different ways that we could look at masculine and feminine, but if we start understanding that in the culture of men has been conditioned differently most of the time than the culture of women. And it's irregardless about biology. So, for example, because I have the biology of a man, there's certain subject matters that have been acculturated by the culture of women. So, I'm a yoga instructor. Most of the people around me, most of my instructors, most of the people I worked with were women. So I was in the culture of women. And so when you ask me something about yoga, you're going to hear a whole bunch of things that are more speaking about and being in the culture of feminine. If you ask me something about martial arts, I was cultured by a community of men. It was in a culture of men. Most of my peers were men. Most of my teachers were men. When you ask me a subject about martial arts, it's going to sound different, right? I'm going to speak differently. I'm going to speak more to the point. I'm going to be more direct, right? And so I just want to be clear about when I say masculine and feminine that I'm speaking about culture. There's also our biologies. There's also something about energetics. But for today's purposes, we're talking about culture. And why I bring this up is because mostly in the culture of men, there's a kind of favoring towards secrecy. And mostly in the culture of women, there's a favoring towards the leaning towards transparency. Mm-hmm. And often when men and women clash together, it's usually because there's a clashing of transparency and secrecy, where one is emphasizing, why aren't you being more transparent, and the other one is emphasizing, why aren't you being more secretive. And usually there's more of a clash. So let me give you one in a very simple way. The biology of the masculine regenerates itself through testosterone, right? And usually when men get together, there's more testosterone in the air. In other words, we tend to when there's no women in a group of men tend to challenge one another. And what ends up happening is the reason why they tend to challenge one another is because that gets their testosterone up. And it makes them feel good in their biology, in their body. When you get a group of women together and there's no men in the mix, there's a way that women tend to be more sensual together. They'll make more eye contact with one another. There'll be more touch involved. And before you know it, their estrogen levels go up. And that's the way they regenerate. So the biology of feminine is being more transparent, being more vulnerable with one another, because that raises the estrogen. With men, there's a tendency to challenge one another and to kind of create this sense of like coming into themselves, and with that comes the building up of testosterone, right? And if there's no men around for men to engage with, to replenish themselves, they go into a cave. They go into isolation. They go into privacy. They go into a dark place, a secrecy. And in that, their testosterone gets regenerated. And with women, there's a way that when there's no other women to engage with to create that sense of regeneration of their estrogen levels, they'll take a bath, something that's sensual, something that will touch their skin to raise their estrogen levels. They'll look in the mirror to make eye contact with themselves. They'll do something beautiful, or they'll stroke their hair, or they'll put on makeup, or they'll do something sensual that will get the estrogen levels up. So understanding this on a very biological, basic body level, all of a sudden things like secrecy and transparency start to kind of unfold from a biological space, where there's a way that it's just understanding biology, and it's understanding culture and why we have these certain kind of leanings there. there's a lot in there.
Wow. Yeah. So, okay, well, I have a question about that, just
Okay.
because a lot of our listeners are queer, gay, or maybe even transgender. What would you say to someone like myself who is in a male body? I definitely know that, like, I need to have my testosterone regulated. I can feel when it's out of balance, so to speak. But I can also kind of feel that with my feminine energy too. And I'm not saying like I'm special and like I think everyone can do this. Like everyone has this, but you know, in reference to people who feel like they're kind of very balanced with their energies, like what would you speak to that as far as like from a scientific perspective, as far as hormones go?
Yeah, well, so I'm glad you asked me that question. You know, it's like I said, regardless of our biology, we all have estrogen and testosterone
Right.
in us.
Yeah.
It just so happens that there's more testosterone in a biology of masculine than there is in feminine,
Yeah.
and vice versa.
Right.
The important thing to get is that transparency and secrecy is like a steering wheel that regulates our hormonal levels within our biology and body, right? So what we've been talking, a lot of things that we've been talking about in the past in terms of the queer culture and straight culture and trying to figure all this stuff out, is this sense of what role someone plays. Now, from what I understood, from what my learning is about the queer culture, is that there's a tremendous amount of costuming, signaling around who's going to be playing what role. The masculine role or the feminine role, how would you term those roles? I don't want to say the wrong words.
Yeah.
Because most straight people, and I just want to like out myself and be more transparent. Like as a straight guy, one of the things that's challenging for the straight culture to understand the queer culture is that we simply don't know what vocabulary to use, and we stumble through it.
Mm-hmm.
And the more room and space you have for your straight friends to do that, the more you can educate them on how
Yeah.
to speak to you in a way that's respectful and honoring.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think there's a lot of different phrases that different people use, you know, even just being as crude as saying top and bottom and stuff like that. I personally don't really like to use that term, just for me personally. I think that just saying masculine and feminine, I am okay with that. I don't think everyone would be okay with that, but I would be okay if I was in a relationship and someone described me as being more feminine and my partner is more masculine.
Yeah. The reason why I say this is because there's a tremendous amount of confusion of what masculinity and femininity is in the straight culture. And I'm guessing that's no different in the queer culture as well.
I think it's even more complex.
Bingo.
Yeah.
I mean, as I start creating more of a community of friends that are queer, and I ask them questions about dating, because you know, one of the reasons why I'm doing this show is to break into the queer culture as a dating coach, you know, like and relationship coach, and I want to support them in that process, because one of the things that we bonded on was the fact that, you know, as a gay man, it was really challenging for you, not just a gay man, but a gay man that has a sacred spiritual side.
Yes.
It was hard for you to figure out how to engage in the queer culture because there's so much polarity in terms of costuming and, you know, identifying as masculine or feminine or top or bottom or what have you, because you didn't want to be kind of confined in one role or the other, even though most of your leaning is towards being more femme and attracting a man that's more masculine. They can hold the characteristics of masculine.
Yeah.
Did I hear that correctly?
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Most of the time, anyways.
Right.
Not always, though.
Yeah. So, you know, because I'm a straight man, I don't quite know how that works, but I can tell you this, that because I feel myself more of a fully spectrumed masculine, which means that I've developed a vocabulary around emotions. As much as I've developed a vocabulary around masculine speak, more straightforward speak, I can also speak more indirectly. And I have a vocabulary of emotions that I gave myself permission to have, despite the cultural upbringing as a man that I shouldn't have them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's this kind of inner sobriety or balancing that happens within me when I can be transparent and secretive.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the whole point. Like, there's a way that if you're going to become a holistic, whole human being, it's not just about seeking that polarity between the masculine and the feminine. It's like, how do you create that harmony within yourself so that when you meet someone, that there's a way that it's not, but it's more of a conscious choice. Chemistry, the most powerful chemistry should be within yourself, not with another human being. This transparency and secrecy is this dynamic act within you, not another person.
And I think that's a crucial part of loving yourself, is really being okay with whatever is there.
Yeah. I just think that regardless of your biology, if you tend to be more sensual, so like if you tend to have more baths, if you tend to have more touch and more eye gazing, engage in activities that raise your estrogen, you're going to be more femme. If you're somebody that's engaged in more testosterone-y kind of things, like, getting challenged, rough and tough kind of stuff, lifting heavy weights, things like that, chances are in raising your testosterone, you're going to be more butch. And you can just try, don't take my word for it, experiment with it. There's a reason, like, the challenge I have with culture is that it identifies you and blocks you in and doesn't give you room to maneuver outside of what you're supposed to be doing. Like, men are only supposed to play sports, women are not allowed to play sports. But underneath all that, there were these biology kind of dictated a little bit. But if you fall somewhere in between, if you happen to be a man and you like taking sensual baths and eye gazing, then your estrogen levels will rise, and then you tend to be more receptive. You tend to be more transparent, right? And that's, and if you're seeking to have another man be attracted to you, that could be a very powerful thing.
Yes. That was actually, I just recently did a show for my show, Realms of Healing, and it's called The Power of a Pure Heart. And because I realized through lots of events, you can listen to the show over on realmsradio.net, that in order to attract love, in order to attract the kind of partner that I want, I have to become pure within myself. And I don't mean to sound very, like, incredibly dualistic, like I'm not pure, I've got to be pure. What I mean by that is I noticed some things within me that was kind of jaded a little bit and afraid, and I've been working on releasing that and relinquishing that and processing that for myself so that I can be open enough to allow this masculine energy to come and see me feeling safe in my femininity to be seen, but also as a man, and attract that into my life.
Yeah. So, and one of the things that you asked me earlier as one of the subject matters of what we'd be discussing for the show is like to honor the divine feminine, because for our listening audience, something that you may or may not know when you're hearing the show, right before we're doing the show, there's Venus, right?
Yeah, Venus is in transit. So today, as we're recording this show, Venus is in transit and is. I actually don't know 100% what that means, but it's going around the sun, or it's doing something. I think it's going to go in front of the sun, or we're going to be able to see it. You can see it with a telescope going in front of the sun.
Yes.
And what a lot of people say or feel, because it only happens once every 117 years, I believe, don't quote me on that, is that that really raises the vibration of of feminine energy in the world.
Yes.
So that is a part of our show today is honoring the feminine, but but it's also really just balancing and allowing yourself to be transparent, taking that quality of being transparent to allow yourself to be more open and flowing.
So when it comes to transparency, we live in a culture that has got so many missing functions. 96% of us have were born into dysfunctional families. 40% of us were born into sexual, physical, or emotional abuse. So there's a lot of functions that are missing in our psyches as we go throughout the world, throughout our day. And when it comes to transparency, many of us, the missing functions that we've developed have actually been conditioned into us. We've been modeled a way of being that's not necessarily healthy or serving in our greatest good. And a lot of it has to do with the function of transparency and secrecy. So this is kind of like what we're taking on. We're taking on the missing functions, the healthy functions of transparency and secrecy in our lives, right? There are a lot of what I call toxic secrets. Many people who've experienced abuse in the past, one of the things that's been robbed of them is that they've been conditioned with a missing function. And that missing function is toxic secrecy. There's a kind of toxic shaming that locks people up from being transparent. I'll be transparent about something from my past. Like, for my listening audience, I grew up in Europe. I was born in Russia. At that time it was Russia. Now it's Ukraine, in a town called Odessa. I came here when I was 8 years old. I skipped kindergarten, first grade, second grade, went straight into third grade. And along with that, I had some learning disabilities. I had dyslexia and so forth. So I had a lot of challenges just to even start. I only stayed back 1 year. But because of this, I've always felt like I had to catch up in the academia, in the school system. And one of the toxic secrets I learned early on was to kind of pretend I was smarter than I really was. And somewhere along in my 20s, when I reclaimed my power in a way, the toxic secrecy started to clear out, and I just started being transparent about what I can and can't do, what I'm good at, what I'm not good at. And a whole ball of tension just released from my abdomen. There was this deep ease that opened and made my life much more at ease, with less anxiety, less stress. I started to ask for help when it was needed. All the way across the board in my life, my whole life shifted and changed because I started to be transparent about the toxic secret that I had. And before I knew it, my life got easier. So secrecy, when it's held on to in a way that camouflages your vulnerability, is a toxic secret. Because ultimately, when we're vulnerable, other people get to know how to honor you, how to nourish you, how to care for you. If you're feeling overwhelmed, stressed out, feeling like you're not getting enough support or help in your life, chances are you're holding on to toxic secrets, and it's time to practice transparency.
I agree. Just before the show, actually, to be completely transparent, I was feeling that way. I asked Tahil to hold some space for me, and he did so beautifully, because I was feeling really overwhelmed with all this stuff that I want to get done, and even though I love all of it, I was feeling overwhelmed, and I realized that the toxic secret that I've been holding on to is that I want everyone to think that I'm Superman, and that I can do things that probably are that other people wouldn't be able to completely do, and still remain balanced and still be happy and all that stuff. And the truth is that no, I can't. I really just can't do that. And I've learned this lesson a few times, but this time around I'm really getting that great. Like, I get to ask for help. I get to ask for support. And, you know, it just like it takes a village to raise a child, it takes the same amount of people to start something and to create something and to help birth something. So
to build a vision and a dream.
Yes.
Yeah. And ironically, you know, like going back to my transparency, as I revealed to people that I'm not as smart as I thought I was, I actually came into my brilliance. And what I mean by that is that I actually started getting curious. I started figuring things out where before I wasn't able to figure it out because I was hiding that I was smart. And I was pretending I had this mirage in front of people that I was pretending I knew something. And the more I just got clear and it's like over time it just gets, you develop this muscle where it's like, wow, I really don't know that. How does that work? And before I knew it, like now people say I'm a walking encyclopedia. The reason why I could be that is because I was honest about the fact that I didn't know something. And people would explain it to me in the way that I can figure it out and get it. And now what makes me a great coach, what makes me a great educator, is that I can explain it in a way that people can get it and understand it from many different angles, the same information, because there were hundreds of people trying to explain to me things that I didn't get. Right?
Yeah. It's just, you know, if it doesn't make any sense to try and be something you're not in the long run.
Yes, it makes sense. Even though it's not always the very thing that actually happens. Emotions are not sensical. Dysfunction is not sensical. Trauma is not a sensical, common sense thing. It happens despite you. It's an altered reality that is made to look like it's a real thing. And then we walk around and wonder why we're not getting nourished, cared for, making contact, having healthy relationships, and so on.
Okay, so in relationships, I know that transparency is vital, and it's so important to have authentic communication. You know, you can even look at it like that. Like how many times in relationships do people miscommunicate and that causes an issue? It happens all the time, even in friendships, everything. It's like almost always the cause of problem is the person wasn't sending out either the correct information or really the person wasn't receiving what the other person was trying to send, or the other person sending the information was trying to play a little mind game and not actually send the right information, and so the other person's feeling completely confused.
So, Gabe, I want to invite you to share something personal.
Yep.
Drop into.
Yep. You're so intuitive. I was setting this up for myself, actually. Okay. Yay. Let's be transparent. So, in the show, The Power of a Pure Heart, on my other show, Realms of Healing. And if you listen to A Cosmic Love Story, which is also on the Realms of Healing show, you can listen to on realmsradio.net, I shared very candidly my journey with love and what has been going on for me. And so just to give you a 30-second recap, it's quite a long story, but I had this energy come visit me for about 6 years, told me to move to California, told me he was my soulmate, all this stuff. Anyways, I followed all the guidance, moved here. The day I moved here, I meet him. We have this incredible chemistry and just lots of cosmic stuff, and he left my life and last August. And I sent him a copy of that show where I really described candidly about everything that happened, everything I felt, Cosmic Love Story show, and I've been waiting to hear back from him, and had this whole epiphany about having a pure heart and all this stuff. Anyways, this has been months since I've heard from him. So he texted me just a couple days ago and said, "Love you, Gabes." That's what he calls me, Gabes. Just out of nowhere, just out of the blue, you know. And I was talking with one of my friends last night, and she brought up a really great point. She said, Gabe, he obviously really wants to still remain connected to you. He sends you these texts and these messages like I love you. He didn't call me and say, hey, I listened to the show, because I know he listened to the show. He told me that. Hey, I listened to the show. I want to talk. He didn't say that, but she said, like, can you see how from his perspective there's a huge expectation on his part to be this soulmate or to be something, and she brought up a really great point, and she said, what if you reached out to him again now that he's texted you, and obviously you're reminded that he kind of like wants to keep a hold on you, but he might not know how to approach that, whether he wants that from you or not. And she had a great point in just calling him up and just saying, hey, look, I would really love for us to practice just being authentic with each other, and I want you to know that I don't expect you to say anything or know anything or tell me anything. I want to feel seen by you, and I want to practice being authentic with each other. And that felt so right. That felt like this whole time we've been messaging each other, and it's been totally surfacey. Well, I shouldn't say surfacey, but it's like we both really care about each other. That's obvious. And he really cares about me. That's obvious. However, we're not addressing anything, really. we're just kind of keeping each other in each other's lives, and I realized that to some extent I was actually playing a little bit of a mind game with him. Even though I had thought that I had done all this stuff and been super transparent, when he would text me stuff like that, I would text him stuff like that back. Yeah, I was totally playing that game. And not to say that he was doing that or I was doing that consciously, but just really realizing that the answer to this issue in my life is to be transparent with him. And it was like, I thought I had done that so much, which I had, just not with him on the phone, like talking one-on-one.
And yeah, there's so much there. The first thing I want to say to the audience and to you is that it's so much more challenging to be transparent in a text, on a phone, and on a Skype. So many things can be misinterpreted, misread, and so on. I just want to start off the bat saying that we live in a technological age that connects us in so many more ways than we are normally used to, which in one way is awesome, and in another way it's overwhelming for many people. And two, a lot of things get lost in the translation of these different media of how to communicate. There's so much communication that happens body to body that can still happen through media, but there's a way that because of the way we relate to the media, like texting, phone, and Skype, that we kind of disconnect our body to communicate to another human's body. Over 90% of the communication that's occurring is not through words. It's through belly-to-belly understanding of what the other person's feeling. And, the most common way that most people communicate now is through texting. You're not going to get it. You might get a belly reaction, but so much can get lost behind the words unless the person is an amazing describer of words to feelings, which is not always the case, because most texting is a very direct, linear kind of communication. So I just want to clear that out. But in general, when you're feeling that surfacey kind of connection with people and you want to drop deeper, it's about figuring out what are the elephants in the room that you're not talking about.
Right, yeah.
That's what toxic secrets do. Toxic secrets, basically, you know that story about the emperor's clothes and the little kid? This is why my technology is all about getting innocent, getting curious, getting confident, finding a place of peace and ecstatic joy with someone. It starts with innocence. You got to be like that little kid saying, wow, that person's naked. They don't have an outfit on, even though everybody else is saying he's got an outfit on. And that's what calling the elephant out in the room is. It's a muscle to develop practicing speaking about the elephant that's in the room. So in your particular story, what's the elephant in the room?
The elephant in the room is that I was madly, deeply, I'm going to steal this word from Twilight, irrevocably in love with him, and I didn't tell him. And now he has listened to a recording where I very candidly describe my entire experience, and he knows how I've been feeling, and there's a part of me that wants to hear what that was like for him to listen.
Yeah, so that would be a powerful conversation if you actually had it with him. Doing a radio show and then sending him a tape is not a conversation.
I agree. I
just want to be clear, and this is what happens. And now it's a delayed reaction.
Yes, I agree. And the reason I did that, I didn't record the radio show so that I could send it to him. In fact, I promised myself when I recorded that show that I would never let him hear it. And then I really felt strongly guided because I wanted to call him. I felt frozen in fear, and I felt like I couldn't. I felt like I just couldn't do it.
That's what a toxic secret feels like. It feels like you're frozen in fear. It is these trauma locks that lock us up into these toxic secrets that we're talking about. Look, what is trauma? A trauma is when I demonstrate on a physical level so people can all get what a toxic secret is. I do trust falls with people. I create a circle of people, right? And I have one person drop back on me and I catch them, right?
Yeah.
And until they start to trust me that I can catch them. And then their whole being relaxes. And then instead of stiffening up when they fall back, they relax and drop back. This is what it is to kind of like have a powerful support system for someone, like make a stand for someone to come out of their shell, to come out as that's what I do for a living, and that's how I show physically people that you can trust someone. Somebody closes their eyes, kind of folds their arms, and just kind of falls back, and I catch them, and before they know it, they trust me. What trauma is, you fell back, somebody says, I'll catch you, and they never caught you. And in your body, even though everything around you is saying, I can catch you, your nervous system is saying, no, you won't. And so you end up reacting bigger than the situation calls for because there's no clear, healthy discernment of the present moment. You just feel contracted. So there's this for some reason or another, somewhere in your past, there was a trauma lock of exposing the fact that you really love someone irrevocably, as you call it, and deeply.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Identifying that would start to help.
Okay.
Not from an intellect, but just in your body. Like, when was a moment in time when you had the courage? As kids, we have courageous acts all the time because we don't know that we can get hurt. So as kids, usually when we're young, we are vulnerable and we fall in love with someone irrevocably and we say it. And we show deep affection. And if somebody just dropped that and wasn't sensitive to the joy and the love that we had and just dropped us, there would be a deep, tremendous fear that went along with it, a lockdown.
So as far as as identifying that, is it important to identify the specific moment, which I feel like it would be, but for me, when I think about my past and my childhood, I mean, it's like I felt like my whole childhood was like that. Like not being able to speak up for myself, being shunned. So I'm sure I can't think of a moment exactly in my mind, but I'm sure it happened.
Yeah, there are clues. At some point, I would definitely go there, and that would take a session to go back and actually feel that moment in time when, the one that I love what I call auto-selective process. The first memory in time that comes back to you is the time that's most relevant to the situation at hand. There's a way that your mind auto-selects what's needed to remember, right? And that takes some time to relax your body and go into it. A lot of the hypnotic exercises that are out there to do that. Things like EFT, emotional freedom technique, There's NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. There's
Somatic therapy.
Yeah, there's so many things that just release the nervous system so that it can finally release. So how it works is that, like if you got traumatized in fear and then the fear got locked up inside your body and never got a chance to be fully expressed, somatic therapy, what it does is it lets you shiver it out, and then it's finally done. And then next time something's lines up that's similar, you're going to be afraid, but you're not going to be overly afraid like the moment in time when you had the trauma. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like that. And there's a way that, the way you described it, there was a lockdown. If there was ever a time to be transparent, it would be a time like when you feel love, and you don't express it. Right? And I think you're not the only one. This is a culture that is so locked up around being loving and caring in the world. This is you're aligning with one of my core missions in life, which is affection and connection in the world to the masses. And I help people build extraordinary relationships. And one of my foundational missions in that is to open up affection and connection. That's natural. I ask people, how often have you felt moved by someone and you wanted to touch them and care for them, and then you pulled your arm back? That pulling arm of the back, that's a toxic secret. There's been a lockdown in our culture from affectionate touch simply because sexuality and intimacy have been collapsed. Right? There's all these lockdowns. The average European gets touched 100 times per hour than the average American.
Wow.
There are so many pullbacks, lockdowns in our nervous system, in our body, to be expressive of affection.
And I also believe that we live in a society that has been conditioned and trained to tear people apart, and anyone who's different. And so I think there is this innate fear of being hurt by anyone, especially in the United States, for just for even being different, for being loving because that's different, for being authentic because that's different, and so I want to acknowledge that I think that is a very valid and very real fear, even though I don't believe it's healthy to partake and participate in that. But I do believe that that is the case, that we are living in this society, and I think we're coming out of this. I really do. But it's still here. It's like you look at People magazine, you look at Entertainment Weekly. What's that ridiculous gossip show? I've seen it like twice. It's on all of the shows on E.
Yeah. Look, it's like this. What you're describing is what I call the distinction between healthy fear and unhealthy fear. Unhealthy fear is false evidence appearing real. If it's like shining a flashlight on a little bug on the floor, and then you see this big shadowy monster on the wall. The big shadowy monster on the wall is the false evidence appearing real. That's the traumatized act of fear. It makes the situation bigger than it really is. And these are all the traumas: fight, flight, freezing, dissociating. All that occurs because you're seeing a monster on the wall that's projected on the wall. The monster ain't real. The bug is.
Nice.
Healthy fear is seeing that bug in front of you and saying, I got to do something about that. That's healthy fear. Unhealthy fear, you see that monster on the wall, and then you don't tell somebody you love them. And it's important to get clear between the distinctions of the two. Yes, we have a tremendous amount of challenges in the world. There's tons of horror stories out there, and it's good to have healthy discernment. And by the way, this is where we come to secrecy or privacy. In order for us to have a clear understanding of what's going on, to have healthy discernment, it needs to have develop a healthy muscle of transparency, and you need to have a healthy muscle of secrecy. There's some things that only grow in the dark. There are times when it's appropriate not to speak, not to share, because what is burbling, what is developing, is not yet ripe. To pick a fruit when it's green is not healthy. To pick a fruit when it's too late is also not healthy. So a toxic secret is a decaying truth that needed to be expressed that hasn't been expressed in a long time.
So
that's usually the elephants in the room. The elephants in the room are the
rotting fruit.
It's what ends up happening is when I say to people, did you ever get that moment in time where you felt moved by someone, you want to touch them with affection?
Oh, of course.
And you pulled back?
Oh, yes.
That pulling back, you've already started a toxic secret. There's a heaviness and a tension that starts to build in your body when you're not transparent in a healthy way. And the longer you hold it, the more illness you develop in your psyche, in your physicality, in your whole walking of life. You just feel stressed and angry. And a lot of it still needs to come out. So what ends up happening is you become full of what I call unconscious permissioning. All these things unconsciously come out anyway because it's nature's program, grace, to keep you still alive. So what ends up happening is if you have a hunger for touch, all of a sudden you become a sex addict, or you don't know why, but you have a compulsion to secretly do things that are always around touch. And if you're somebody who has a compulsion to, like, you don't know why you have food addictions, but all of a sudden underneath all that is because you weren't transparent about what you really want to eat. You couldn't tell somebody what you really wanted to eat, so you end up going underground and you see, I don't know how that bag of chips got disappeared. I don't know where it went. Really, all you wanted to do is like, wow, I really want chips. But you've identified with a whole persona that I'm a healthy person and I don't need chips. Or, like, as a health counselor, I sat for years listening to people's secrecy coming out. That's all I did. It was like I helped them clear out their toxic secrets. And all of a sudden their addictions started to clear out because they got a place to be transparent.
I would absolutely agree with that because, as most of you all know, I struggled with food addiction for, most of my life. And I felt like I was trying to work on it. Nothing really ever worked until I started working at a company called Cafe Gratitude, where before you're allowed to work and be on the floor, you must sit down with another person and get in touch with what you're feeling and share with them authentically what you're feeling. And it was so powerful that while I was working there, I had no cravings for, no unhealthy cravings for food.
Yeah. And this is, so it's just, physically there's a tension that starts to build when you're wanting to be transparent and it's not coming out. The healthier you get in transparency, the better timing you have. So, like, the moment you have an instinct, you express it.
Oh, yeah.
That's healthy transparency, right? And what it does is it brings up estrogen in your body, and it brings on the beautiful thing that comes in from estrogen, which is oxytocin. And oxytocin was touted to be the chemistry of empathy. It invokes the mirror neurons to feel what other people are feeling. It is that thing that makes you think of others as well as yourself.
Wow.
But here's the thing. If you have toxic transparency, and this usually happens in a world of healing and transformation with a lot of people, because they've kept so many toxic secrets that they go the opposite realm, and they become transparent about everything. And this is when you get people that are talking about their incest and their rape on a regular conversation dinner table, like in the middle of nowhere, because it's been so locked up for so long. They just want to go out there and tell everybody, without seeing the context around them. And what ends up happening is a tremendous amount of breakdown everywhere. So it's important to create that centered balance. And how do you create that? You create that by finding privacy and secrecy in a healthy way. Think of secrecy and privacy as the brake pedal, and think of transparency as the gas pedal in the steering of your own inner soul coming from the inside out. And a healthy transparency lets you know how to let other people see who you are in a way that they're ready to see, and when you're ready to reveal. The privacy lets you know how to have healthy discernment of if you're sharing something authentic, and are you sharing it with someone who can actually hear, feel, and see that, right? So if people don't have enough privacy in their lives, we've talked about toxic secrets, right? The toxic transparency is that you end up sharing without listening who is taking the information in front of you. There's a lot of people who pass on their abuse that they've gotten in themselves. So if you are a survivor, if you're somebody who had vile and unspeakable things happen to you, as you start coming out and start owning your toxic secrets and start clearing them out, which is so locked up, and it is such an epidemic in our culture, such pain. Your heart just breaks listening to people's stories. But as you start coming out and sharing, many times when survivors, like on the other side of sharing what they've gone through, also say the downfall is that in their plight of being transparent about their toxic secrets, so much harm also comes around them. Because nobody's taught them that there's a healthy pacing to do it. There's such a strong need to do it. And there's a way that it decimates their entire life. In relationships, jobs, all that. And there's a way that it could be tempered by some pacing, some understanding, some finding of privacy, and waiting for that, and it's not easy, because by the time it's gotten to be that toxic, that withheld, every fiber in your being wants to shout it from the mountaintops.
And so you're saying that it's better to, maybe not better, it's more effective to, for example, do it in a context where real space can be held for you, like going to seeing a counselor versus sharing it at a dinner table, or something along those lines, like getting some help of some kind for that.
Yeah, and it takes time and muscle and discernment. But what I'm saying is that a lot of counseling, a lot of therapy deals with the transparency, but it doesn't talk about reclaiming the healthy privacy and secrecy.
Mm-hmm.
See, it's not just the lack of, transparency is needed, but at a certain point, that person that they're working with also needs to learn how to have a healthy privacy as well.
Right, yes.
And that's typically not talked about in counseling and therapy. So what ends up happening is that person keeps being transparent, and their lives keeps getting, something still feels off. And what's off is that they haven't found a brake pedal to their transparency. And it's not just a lack of being able to share what is happening on the inside. It's also a lack of knowing when to keep quiet in a healthy way. That's also been stolen.
I would agree with that. I think I do know some people who are, I would guess, always transparent. And it, when I first met them, it was like, whoa, it was kind of interesting. It was like, wow, this is so neat. But after, just a few weeks, it kind of got wow, all right. So is there anything that you want to deal with, or I guess have it brewed within you and then share it at a later time, just based off of what you said earlier? I could totally see that. It felt like they were actually pushing against what was good for them and against life, kind of like they were like, I'm transparent. How are you today? Oh, well, I'm really great. I'm feeling, or just whatever it is. It's it seemed completely actually inauthentic, even though they were
right
trying to be transparent.
When transparency seems inauthentic, it's usually because the fruit that is given is green. And what it looks like when transparency looks green, you could tell that person hasn't really maturated what they're saying. They're just blah, blah, blah. Let me try to think of an example in myself. There are times when I get so excited about an idea, I'm transparent about the excitement, and by the time I'm finished telling everybody what I want to do, it feels like I've already done it, and I never do it. That's a green transparency. There's a way that you just become transparent, and it's like you're so busy talking about it that you don't actually do it. But there's a certain point where you can become when it's matured enough in your body of what you want to do. Like you gave yourself time for it to land in your belly, and you feel the butterflies in your stomach, and you feel the body moving in action towards your vision, towards your dream. And then you share it with someone. It's like, then it becomes more, it inspires people. It moves, your belly moves their belly. That's a healthy transparency moves others. It resonates other people to be in alignment in some way. They might like it, they might not like it, but something pulls them with dignity and respect to what you have to say. And if you say it green, it feels like they're always like they'll want to keep, they'll shun you, or they'll put, if it's green and they're a naysayer, you get shut down. You know, if they say, oh, that dream will never happen, all of a sudden,
yeah, goodbye.
Right? Or if they're flamers, they'll go, oh, yeah, you can do it. And then you get this distorted view of what you can or can't do. You understand? That all of a sudden you get thrown off track.
I just want to say, I think that's an Aquarian thing. I know you and I, when we last talked, we were talking about doing a documentary, revolutionary romance documentary, which is an awesome idea. And I at the time, we were both like, yes, let's do it. And then I thought about it the next day, and I was just like, I don't have the space for a documentary right now. Like, I have too much going on. And but that's okay. You know, that's okay. And I also realized that within myself too, you know, as you said that, and it makes a lot of sense, the green transparency, because I had decided a couple months ago that I wanted to start writing a novel. And I was, of course, initially really excited to tell everyone about it, and I was like, oh, I really wanted to tell people, but I felt like, you know what? I don't even know what the heck this story is going to be about yet. Like,
bingo.
I can't tell people, and now I'm at the point where I'm comfortable to just tell people, hey, I'm flirting with the idea of writing a novel. And that's it. Like, that's all.
And that's more honest.
Yeah,
right?
that's it. You know.
But it's this burbling of giving yourself space to kind of come into the idea, you know, and finding, this is all about discernment, really. The simultaneous attention and awareness that there's a full cycle of transparency and secrecy that occurs in our relating day to day creates a sense of presence and discernment. Healthy discernment comes from transparency and secrecy. There's a time to be secretive. There's a time to be transparent. And if you don't balance the two, there's a kind of stuckness. You feel either stuck or running out of control. If you're transparent in an unhealthy way, you look like what I call full steam ahead sideways.
I like that.
Right? You end up going really fast, but in the wrong direction. Right? Mm-hmm. And that's transparency. If you ever see people around you like that, if you're one of the people that's doing that, then slow down and find some more private time where you don't have to talk to other people, but you're hanging out with yourself. Personal time. Your time. No one else's. Just your time. That's privacy. Privacy is with your own thoughts, writing in a journal, you know, reading your own thoughts, saying what is it that I really believe versus anybody else? What is my authentic thought? It's very rare that people actually know that. Most people are like parroting other people's stuff. Very few of them actually know what they want. And then healthy privacy is this place of just going into your cave and knowing it. You know, when women go into their cave, I think what they're looking for is discernment. I think what privacy does, from all the years of just observing it, is that it creates this healthy, it's an unattached discernment where you don't, like, there's a way that you can make decisions that are unattached to the situation at hand.
Welcome to the conversation. You're listening to the Revolutionary Romance After Show.
There's a prosperity author. Her name's Edwene Games, and I actually saw her speak, and she writes all these prosperity books. And one of the things that she says, which I've always remembered, is that your goals are between you and God. And I can see how that fits into what we're talking about today. We're talking, or what we just got, through talking about, is that there is a time when, yes, when we feel called to share, but it will feel so natural and effortless. It won't be coming from a place of like almost anxiousness or validation, or wanting to prove oneself. Like, look what I'm doing. I'm doing something great. Do you want to validate me? Do you want to give me the stamp of approval? And what's great about that is that either way, whether someone might have said, "Oh, that's an awful idea. You shouldn't do that," or someone is just kind of like saying, "Oh gosh, that isn't a really good idea, but yes, go ahead and do it." It really gives us the ability to tap into our own wisdom and feel like, I think I need to do this, or I think I'm going to do it a little bit differently, instead of going with how that person might have said it, like just allowing yourself to be with it, be private with it, be secret with it for a little bit, let it gestate, let it grow, let it form itself, so that way you can then bring it out into the world, whatever it is, whatever kind of goal it is, help it to manifest in the most authentic way for you.
Yeah, and authenticity is the eye on the ball in this process, and it's about really getting clear. How well am I being transparent, and how well am I being in private space? If you're lacking a sense of discernment in your life, if you're always constantly being influenced by other people, and you feel like you're losing a sense of who you are, chances are you're not having enough healthy privacy. You're not spending time with yourself, So these are the calling cards. You might not notice on a more subtle level transparency and secrecy, but as you practice, you will. But the calling cards are this, like, wow, I'm feeling lost. I have no idea who the heck I am. And you take a survey of your life and you realize that, wow, like I have followed every other person's ideas and I haven't really taken the time to figure out what I truly want.
Yeah.
More privacy, more time with yourself.
Yes.
If you're finding that you have a tremendous amount of tension and that you're a lone wolf and that you're always doing things on your own and that you're like finding yourself isolated and alone, then chances are you're not getting enough transparency. It's time to clear out toxic secrets. It's time to clear out the elephants in the room. Do the feng shui of your psyche.
I like that phrase.
Welcome to the conversation. You're listening to the Revolutionary Romance After Show.
So with transparency and secrecy and elephants in the room, would you say that, and maybe for every person that's different, but would you say that is it better to go a certain route? Like, for example, let's say, okay, Gabriel llhewellyn-ari has a huge elephant in the room with someone he used to be in love with. And he's also working on being transparent in his life, just in general, authentically transparent. And from this point on, taking plenty of time for secrecy, too, and quiet time. And so, would you recommend something to focus on first? I'm getting very linear here, but that's okay. I have a Virgo moon. So, would you recommend doing, like, for example, okay, I'm going to focus on clearing up these elephants in the room because that's, like, so toxic. Getting, even just beginning to work on my toxic secrets. And then I'm going to, from there, I'm really going to focus on just being a little bit more transparent in my life. Like, when I'm feeling like I want to hug someone, I'm going to go hug them.
Okay, so when it comes to revealing your toxic secrets, it's good to have professional guidance and support. Therapists that really know what they're doing, counselors that really know what they're doing, coaches that really know what they're doing, especially around trauma. And, finding an ecosystem of people that you can truly it's almost like you have to borrow the function of discernment from people, ironically, that you can trust, which is probably hard for you to find because of the lack of function that's in it. And this is one of the greatest challenges for people who had abuse in the past, is like having that healthy discernment about who can they authentically trust. And a lot of times there's like vicious cycle where they attract people who are abusers because it's what feels familiar. It's what feels, from the past. But once you do find that support and that help, it's about revealing it to people who can actually hear you, who can hold the toxic secret. And it's important that you get clear about who can hold it and who can't, who can hear it and who can't, and learn to share. Because when you're something that deeply vulnerable, you need to have someone that can equally meet and hold space for that, right? But after it starts to clear out and the space starts to clear out, you can have a community of people around you that can have that support around the way you can be transparent. There's a reason why there's things like sex-positive culture. It develops because, people can be more transparent around their sexuality. There's a reason why there's queer culture, because there's a way that they can be more out around their homosexuality or, their gayness. And when there's a reason why women like to hang out with women, because there's a kind of transparency that they have amongst each other that, I often say, look, if there's a group of women around and the moment a man walks in, conversations change. There's a certain kind of privacy that happens in that group of women the moment a man enters. Now, what's ironic, and what I'd love to at one point investigate with you, is what happens when a queer man walks in. And what is the difference in that group of women when a queer man identifies himself as femme, or a queer man identifies himself as butch, walks into the room? Very different.
That would be interesting.
And I have a feeling that it's different.
I would say, only because I have lived a lot of experiences like that, I would say that most women, unless they have very deep wounds around men, feel completely safe with me.
Yeah, which is not the case with most women around men.
Yeah.
This is a culture that has conditioned many women to have a guard first around men.
Yeah.
And then before it relaxes, and there's this, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So and it's what's important for women to notice that most women don't realize this, but the moment they walk into a room when there's men around, men don't feel safe either. They just don't have the vocabulary to say that they don't feel safe. Because men radically shift their conversations when women are around.
Yeah, they do.
And it's because of this dynamic why so many men are confused to what women are thinking, and why so many women are confused to what men are thinking. Because there's this lockdown.
I wonder how that works in the queer cultures. Like, for example, if there's a bunch of butch lesbians hanging out, and then a femme girl walks up, I wonder if it's similar.
Again, there's a lot of experimenting to be done that simply hasn't been done, especially because the one thing that I've definitely got clear as I investigate the queer culture, not just through you, but as I talk to my other friends in the queer culture, the moment I raise up the question of gender and identification of gender as a role, lockdowns occur.
It's major lockdown.
It is like, oh, I don't identify this, I don't identify that. But when I ask them in this way, when you, most men that you're attracted to, would you say they're more femme or more butch? And then it starts to get clear. Then it becomes clear about how they identify. But if you ask them how they identify, oh no, can't speak about that.
But when you ask them about what they like in a partner, or
all of a sudden it gets clear. It's like, oh, I'm more femme, or oh, I'm more butch. I like more masculine men. I like more feminine men. It's like, but for some reason nobody can talk about that. I really think that if you start becoming more transparent as queer men and queer women, if you identify yourself as queer, it changes the game. But then it gets even more interesting. Like I went to Symbiosis the other day, and I had my gay friend there, and he's like, it used to be that if he lives in Castro, is like there's all these signals that gay men give to each other about what they're into. But now, because of the spiritual culture that's coming in, there's this kind of like all the signals are off, because you have these beautiful men and they have this vocabulary and emotions, which used to be a signal. The only permission that men had to be emotionally expressive is in the queer culture. Now all of a sudden these straight men, they have a vocabulary in emotional speak, and there's a lot more of them in the spiritual culture than there is anywhere else. So all of a sudden the radar is off.
Yeah.
And on top of that, there's a lot of men in the spiritual culture that are identifying themselves as queer, but not homosexual. So So we had this conversation where he got interested in this young man who gave him a hug for about 5 minutes. It's like, I have no idea if he's gay or not, because there's no cues. So I said, why don't you ask him? And so he did. He directly asked him, said, are you gay? And he said, I'm queer, but I'm not homosexual.
Huh.
And so there's a lot of men that are in a spiritual culture how they identify as queer is that they don't want anybody to label them as masculine or feminine, because they find that to be limiting in their spiritual presence in the world. And they don't want to have anybody tell them who they can love and how they can love.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So they have identified as queer in that way, but they might not necessarily be into men. So if I was a gay man, I'd be like, what the it's a what the F in that particular case. It's just, it's so challenging, and the only way that we can all start getting to understanding is that if we just start speaking about these challenges and talking about these elephants in the room.
So just because we're on the topic of queer men and gender and roles per se, like how would I I was thinking about this, what I'm about to say here, and I've been thinking about it a lot, is that how would I let another guy know, like let's say I'm interested in this guy and I can see that he has masculine energy. That's pretty easy to spot, right? And maybe I even
for you,
right?
I just want to be clear about that.
Okay. Well, it is. It's really easy for me to spot because I'm attracted to it like a magnet.
Okay.
So, and let's say maybe I know he's into men, right? So then, how do I let him know that I am more feminine energy? Because who knows? It's bizarre because there are some masculine gay men that like only masculine men, which gets even more complicated because it's just like, now if I see a guy who's masculine and I know he's gay, it's like he might not actually be into feminine guys. So for me,
or not just feminine guys, but you in particular.
Yeah, he might. Yeah,
so there's
exactly. There's like this gauntlet that I get to run down. Like, let's see if I make it to the end. And so I've been thinking, like, how can I just let them know? And I mean, one way, of course, is like how I dress. Like I could dress more feminine, which I'm okay with.
Which, by the way, is why in the queer culture costuming is so important.
Ah.
But here's the problem: if you're hanging out in a more spiritual community, especially in the Bay Area, there's a lot of straight men that look awesome. They look hot. They like slim clothing. They have a lot of cues that the gay culture has, and that's what that man was talking about when I was hanging out with him. And at this festival, it's like you just don't know. There's so many gorgeous men, and everything that is given permission to as gay men in our cultures that identifies you as gay is no longer just yours. It is now many other men are saying, well, what the fuck? I want to have the same permission as you. I would like to have the diversity in emotions. I would like to be able to be sensual. I would like to be able to dance with other men. I would like to be able to hold hands with men. I'd like to be able to give men hugs. I'm just not into having sex with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now comes this whole new ball game. And we're all rediscovering it together.
Mm.
And on top of this, I'll take it even one step further. As I investigate all this cross-gender, cross-cultural divides and all that, there are some men that identify as queer that don't want to limit to who they fall in love with. And they may be able to have sexual encounter with other men, but that is like maybe 5-10% of the time.
Yeah, right. I've known men like that.
Yeah. So there's so much diversity, and the only way that can be talked about is actually being talked about. Like just having the muscle to say, you know, I really like you. You know, I'm just curious. Like, are you just being out there and being transparent?
Wow. So just like, here I am.
And what makes it challenging is that now we have these certain transparencies are hard to do because of your assumptions or these lockdowns of what you think masculine or feminine should do, regardless of your biology or your sexual orientation. You know, so like, well, a lot of women that ask me, well, like I'm attracted to this man, but I don't know how to tell him because he's not getting that I'm attracted to him. And I was wondering if there's anything wrong with me asking him. Because there's a whole bunch of women that still feel locked up that the man should do the asking.
Right.
And that there's this whole polarity. Like, well, if I ask, then does this mean that the whole polarity will change and I'm going to become the asserter and I really want him to be? Like, there's all this stuff that's going on.
But can't you even, you know, can't you say things without, you know, okay, so we're talking about transparency here, and here I am talking about being less transparent. But
well,
but it's also about pacing too.
Yes.
So let's say, you know, I'm attracted to some guy, which happens a lot. And,
you are such a flirt.
Well, but what if I started, you know, so let's say, you know, okay, I want to make it known that I'm attracted to this guy. Like, what I think would be good for me to do is to add in like little clues, like how you doing, cutie? Like for him to be like, whoa, did you just call me cutie? You just called me cutie, like, or something like that. Versus saying like, so we need to have a talk, and I'm gonna hold your hand, and I'm really attracted to you, and I was, you know what I mean? Like making, maybe just like being the invitation for that, like making it known that you think they're cute. Initially, and not just keeping it there though, not just being like cutie, 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 but then like eventually being like, if they don't respond, saying like, so I'm really attracted to you, and then they can look back and be like, wow, well, there was a lot of signs for me to like.
Yeah,
do that.
I'll tell you what I tell a group of women when they ask me the same question. Like, I had a woman ask me, does hard to get work with men?
It's hard to get work with men?
Does hard to get work with men?
There's hard to get. Oh yes.
Okay.
I do that.
All right.
I've done that.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm about to say. So what I tell her is like, look, a lot of the subtlety and that is wasted on men. Like, if a man is a man's man, right, typically a lot of the subtlety gets wasted on men because it goes over their head. In their culture, they speak more direct, more straightforward. They're less spiral. And a lot of women make a mistake of alluring men like they would allure another woman. What works in the feminine culture does not necessarily translate or work in men's culture. And if that happens to stay true in the queer culture, then it was something to be looked at, right?
I would say so, yeah.
So you could be feminine, but translate into man talk a little bit. There has to be some place of a directness, so that man gets that you're actually wanting them. You could be subtle in many ways, but there's a way that you kind of like, if the man is not getting it, you got to get more blunt, more straightforward.
Yeah,
Like, here's the carrot, honey. There it is. And the way you usually get, and why it makes it more challenging is like the easiest, quickest, fastest way to get someone to get present to you as a presence is to touch them.
Really? But
So like if I and this is why in all the courting rituals, if somebody comes up and touches you, it drops you. It locks you into presence to that person. You can feel them.
yes.
But in our culture, that's locked up, as I previously said, and because of that, there's kind of like a disconnect. That man, if they're so locked up around attraction because it's been so, if that man's attracted to you, they even have to lie to themselves to say that they can't be attracted to you. There's a lockdown in that. Add to that there's even homophobia within the queer culture itself.
Yes, I agree.
There's so much blocking in and getting in the way for actually getting to, like, I think the most powerful and simplest way to let other people know that you're attracted to them is letting them know through touch, through eye contact, and being direct about wanting to spend time with them. Period.
Okay, say that one more time.
Touch, eye contact, and being more direct that you want to spend more time with them.
That's great.
And all other games are just that. They're games. We need to be more transparent about what we want, what we need, what we hunger for, who we want, why we want them. Most of the time, the connection is just simply wanting to get to know that person, and we need to be more transparent about that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so simple. I was always I marveled at a former roommate that I had, and she was very transparent with a lot of stuff in her life. But what I marveled at was that when she was attracted to someone, she would let them know, like in that moment, right? Like first meeting. Like just so you know, I think you're really cute, or I'm really attracted to you. And I thought, no wonder she always has boyfriends. Like she always
ding 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 ding.
Always has boyfriends.
Yes, it is a secret.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the irony: what do women say when a woman is able to do that? They call her the S word.
Yeah.
The moment that you have a certain kind of prowess, a function, a healthy function to connect with other people, oh my God, you're a slut. You have a tremendous ability to flirt, but somehow the function of closing the deal and the flirting has been locked up in you. As your friend, as somebody who knows you.
Yes.
Like from what I've seen.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of people that know when you walk into the room, but selecting that person that you really like and letting them specifically know, that doesn't happen. That doesn't get followed through. And if you start being able to unlock that, I'm guessing that you would get a lot more of what you want.
Wow. Yeah, I guess what I'm present to you is that just brings up a lot of stuff for me, which I probably think it would bring up a lot of stuff for other people, which is great. Yay, get to deal with our stuff.
Be transparent about the stuff so that other people can feel.
My abandonment issues. Major. Yeah, that comes up. Yeah, just the fear of being hurt again. And the fear of being judged and criticized, which is all stems from my childhood, from my parents, basically. So, yeah, and that's just, it's triggering my wounds. It's triggering my wounds and my trauma around that.
One of the things that I do as part of my work is intimacy labs. I call them connection and affection circles. Time and time again, complete strangers gather in a circle, and the amount of intimacy that develops in those circles is profound. And one of the ways that I orchestrate that is that as people share with me the transparency that you just said, like things they're afraid to say and then they say it anyway, and how I have them connect with the group and they say, everybody else raise your hand if you have, like, finally somebody has the courage to share something that they were afraid to say in that group, right? And then they say it, and I say, how many in this group actually have that similar fear? And everybody, if not 3/4 of the room, raises their hand. And what gets really quickly apparent in that group is that everything that they were afraid to share because they thought they were the only one having that process, they start to realize that most people have that same process inside them. And that's the dark joke of it all. And the more you can get clear and honest about that, the more you realize that it's just human.
Mm-hmm.
It's just humans dealing with human things. And if you start developing an innocence, a dignity that comes from innocence inside you, start realizing that those that can't hold those transparencies in you are not the right person to be followed through anyway. And it's better to find that out from the get-go than to have 2 or 3 dates, or God forbid even sleep with that person and then find out afterwards.
So is it beneficial? I think I already know the answer to this, but I'd love to hear what you have to say. I'm being the general public. Is it beneficial to, well, I think it's always beneficial to work on your stuff. Is it helpful to work on your stuff first so you feel more comfortable sharing authentically with people? Like whatever stuff that is coming up for you? Like I was talking about?
That has a lot to do with transparency and secrecy, like we were talking about earlier. If you're working on your stuff for like a decade and you're feeling isolated and alone, then you've been working on it way too fucking long. Get out there and be more transparent.
Yeah.
Right? If you're feeling isolated and alone and you're overwhelmed and not getting enough help, get more transparent. In key areas of what you're most afraid to share with people that you think can handle it. And if they can't, go move on to somebody else until they can. Keep going until you find somebody that you can. That's what innocence does. A kid, goes rides his bicycle and then says, "Hey, Mary, you want to play?" And Mary goes, "Nope." "Okay." And they keep going. "John, you want to play?" "No." "Okay." And they keep going, and then they finally find somebody who says yes, and then they play. They don't go through all this melodrama that adults do with all the unconscious, conditioning that we got about oh my God, why did they say no? Why did they say yes?
It's okay.
All that.
Yeah.
So it's like that.
Wow. Okay. So you wouldn't. So you would say that dealing with our trauma is important, but to not let it stop you in really being transparent and authentic with people.
Yeah, it's important that you be transparent around the toxic heaviness and secrecy that you have. And it's important that you become more private around where you're leaking energy and power. It's finding that teeter-totter of presence and discernment in your life. When you're feeling happy and content, it's usually because you have a healthy balance of transparency and secrecy. If you're feeling off-center, if you're feeling ill in any way, those are clues to where your transparency and secrecy are. If you're feeling like you're always in action and you're going the wrong way, you're not having enough healthy privacy. If you're always in a state of feeling like you're heavy and tense and that you're not in action, then chances are you're not in healthy transparency.
Yeah.
So you're just always looking for the calling cards.
It's like a wheel. It's like a wheel.
Yes.
Like the wheel of secrecy, transparency.
Right. It's two sides of the same coin that need to be understood in terms of how you function. And you can't witness both unless you start seeing unless you start getting present. In the spiritual culture, they call this the witness self. Like you get present and you get to be flexible. You're not stuck in being locked up, and you're not stuck of always wanting to be transparent.
Yeah.
You pick the timing of when you want to do what for what is needed. That's healthy discernment. Discernment is knowing, wow, I need to be more transparent now, or wow, I really need to be more secretive. I need to be more in my private space. I've been out there too much. I need to be getting my ducks in order in my own psyche. What does I really want? Get clear about that. And then I go out there.
I like that.
Yeah.
I will say I think I need more secrecy and privacy. I can see that I've been out of balance there.
And now you're coming to a really big secret. In the culture of women, I typically talk about getting more in touch with their privacy and personal time. In fact, there are many women that I've coached to have their own room in the space of a house. If they're married, I can tell them, like, hey, do you have your own space? When is your own time? It's really important to figure that out for yourself.
Yeah.
When is your time to just be with you?
Yeah.
And with men, I usually say, hey, how are you engaging with other people? How are you?
Interesting.
Right? Because men have a tendency to be more balanced when they're more transparent. Women tend to be more imbalanced when they're having more of that private space and time with themselves. So
wow.
I'm sure it translates into their queer culture in some way or another.
Yeah.
In terms of how it's been.
Wow. Ooh, more private time. Okay. Put that on the menu.
And what ends up happening is that women or men who identify more as femme will tend to find more power in themselves.
Yes.
And be able to speak
that.
more and set up healthy pacing with people when they start having more secrecy and privacy in their life. And men who have the capacity to start being more transparent will start having more social and more social activity and more space for emotional expression.
I can really see that just in a lot of my friends. I have this one friend who's super awesome, and he's straight, and he is not very transparent, at least with other people. Like, I'll ask him how he's doing, and he's like, "Good, how are you?" every single time. And he's also a very spiritual human being, you know, like really, really cosmic. And yeah, I can see how he kind of holes up in his space and doesn't really get out much, and yeah, I can see that.
But aside from masculine and feminine, I also want to say this, that like if I don't hang out with men for a while, I'm only hanging out with women, I wig out. Like, I need to have some time with men. And women have the same thing, you know. But I would also say that in a queer culture, gay men need to hang out with some gay men. And, you know, lesbian women need to hang out with some lesbian women. Like, if you're not hanging out with your culture, you know, over time you start wigging out. There's something that starts missing in your languaging of, there's something starts missing in your belly.
Yeah.
Like, you need to have the ability to be able to be in that culture to kind of rejuvenate you.
I think so. So I'm looking for some new gay friends. Gay male friends.
Well, that's and this is something that you and I identified earlier when we talked. You know, it's like there's a way that a lot of your queer culture that you have is lesbian women.
That's true.
You don't have a lot of gay men in your life. And then as I probe deeper, do you mind if I share this?
Go all the way.
Well,
open book.
When I was like, well, why aren't you at Castro? Why aren't you going into queer culture more? And you're saying, well, you know, there's a way that I'm really afraid of masculine gay men. I'm attracted to them, but I'm also afraid of them.
Yes, there is that.
Right? And so there's this, like, push and pull.
Yeah.
Right? And it physically keeps you out of the culture where a masculine man could be. Because I've hung out with you as a friend. We've gone to parties. It's mostly lesbian women. Or if there are gay men there, they're usually femme.
Yeah.
Which is not your particular cup of tea. Right? So what ends up happening is the same thing that, like, when women come to me, it's like, man, I just don't have any men in my life. And then I go through a social calendar. It's like most of their activities is with women. I was like, you're not hanging out with any men. And the same thing with men. Like, men, like, hang out with other men, but there's no, like, activities with women. It's like, if you want to be out, if you're a single person and you're not hanging out with people that are of the opposite gender, or in your case, you're attracted to, then it's not going to happen. Like, it's going to take a miracle of existence in order for that to happen. Like, somebody has to materialize. That's a lot. Like, you're not meeting it halfway.
Oh.
You got to be in it to win it. You got to be in the culture, in the group of people.
I like that.
To have it. But there's the fear that deals with it to actually be in it has not been met.
You're not meeting it halfway.
Yeah. Too much staring at the monster on the wall and not enough seeing the bug on the floor. The shadow, you know, with the light. Remember that analogy?
Yeah. It's almost like, it's kind of like being Rapunzel and you're stuck up in the tower, but you have the capability to get out of the tower. but you're waiting for someone to come and take you out of the tower when you actually can do it yourself.
Yeah, that's been the message of the feminine energy for decades now. You know, this is why come I am woman, hear me roar.
Right,
Like,
right.
come into your lion. Like, you got to find your lioness inside and
yes,
let
I like
that
that
roar
analogy.
out and let it come out and be out there where men can see you, that you like.
Okay. All right. I can do that.
And saying all this to you, I'll be more transparent. I'm realizing that because I have an alternative relationship where I'm not monogamous, but I'm in a relationship where we're open to dating other couples and other women. I am realizing that I'm not hanging out enough with alternative culture so I'm going to start working on that with my sweetie, and we're going to start being more out there around that.
Cool.
So we're all working on it.
Yeah, it's 2012.
Yes.
Shifting our own partnership paradigms and realizing that we really, even if our energy is needing a balance of more privacy, there is still this calling to some extent to put ourselves out there, to take action, to be all that we can be, whether it's our relationships, whether it's our money, whether it's our health. It's time. It's humanity's golden age has come, and so too for our relationships.
Yeah, we have to take that leap.
Mm-hmm.
It's so easy to get lulled into complacency.
It is. It's so easy. It's so easy. And I know for me even, I don't know why I said even, but for me, I can use my work and or my creative projects. I'm going to rephrase that. My creative projects, all these different things that I love to do, as a way of as I think about it, I don't know if I do it as a way to not be in a relationship, because that's another thing that's come up for me is I actually feel really busy, and it's good. I like that, and I also feel to some extent that I feel somewhat comfortable, at least right now, not being in a relationship, just because I have a lot of I'm really open to one. I'm even open to setting aside time to put myself out into other communities where that could happen. Absolutely. But I feel a contentedness with myself and my life for the most part. This morning I had a little bit of an issue, but overall, I feel really great. And I guess for someone to come into my life at that level, and for me to kind of be having to step down from all these things that I love to do a little bit, it's they've got to be, pardon my language, but pretty fucking amazing. They've got to be pretty awesome and worth it for me, worth my time. And so I think, here's my point. I think there's a part of me that feels oh, that's going to take so long. I don't know if I'll actually find someone. I'm so busy. I'm loving what I'm doing. I would say that is what I could let go of, is that story.
Yeah, this is actually a very typical story of a lot of career-driven women.
I'm just a woman in a man's body. Oh my gosh.
Well, I can only relate to what I've seen. I'm
Yeah.
just getting into the queer culture, so I'm deciphering it from my experiences.
Yeah.
And I've heard a lot of women who are in the corporate world who all of a sudden looked around and their biological clock is ticking. They actually want to be a mom. They want to be married. They want to be in a relationship. But they've been so driven by their career. They love what they do. They're making good money. They're solid. They're stable. And it's when they look at the men out there, and it's they go through the same process. They're like, it has to be a freaking amazing guy. Their standards are usually high, and my work with them as a coach is usually like, how can I have their deal breakers are so many that they deal break themselves out of any relationship anywhere. And so they feel isolated and alone, and there's this lack of being engaged in the world. You know, so you can be content, you can be enjoying your career, you can have a great life, but if you're longing to have a partner, it's important that you get clear about that you need to be in the process in order to get one. It's not magically going to appear. Yes, every once in a while there's a chance encounter and you never know, but the likelihood of it happening is a lot more if you're in the process. Dating is a lost art. You have to be in a dating process to be dating, which means you have to be in front of people that are interested in you and you're interested in them. You need to be in social gatherings where there's people that might be attracted to you and you're attracted to them. If that's not happening, you're not in a dating process. You can't wait, like you said, like Rapunzel on top of a tower waiting for some prince to come. It's not going to happen that way. Hate to break the bad news. But there's always exceptions to the rule. I'm just covering my ass on that one. But aside from that, you got to be in it.
Okay. See, I love a lot of what you say because it's so simple. It's just like it's not that complex. It's like, you know, look people in the eyes, touch them, and tell them how much you want to spend more time with them. Like, wow, that's so simple. There's not like, okay, so you need to do body language and, you know, twirl your finger on your glass and twirl your hair and make your hips sway and all this stuff, which is so complicated and it's so hard to remember it all.
That sounds hot, but
yeah, it is.
And it's all, but start with the basics and work your way out. The basics is eye contact.
Back to basics.
Touch, letting people know that you're interested in them, that you want to spend more time with them. 9 times out of 10, you're going to get a pretty good favorable response if they're into you.
And so I have experienced, so I want to say that since we've started our show, I had one person that I was extremely interested in who happened to be almost the exact opposite of what I usually go for. And we've talked about it on the show before. And what happened was following suit with, you know, the intimacy dance, which you can listen to in the archives. It's our first show. It's a great show. Really funny. It was really funny. I did that. Like, I was engaging, I invited him, I took the initiative, and so, which was great. It's all great. And what happened, what I found out, is that he's one of these guys where everyone knows he's gay. Everyone's like, you're gay. He's like super femme, and he's really cute, and he's gay. It's like obvious, at least most people. And either A, he hasn't come to terms with that himself, B, he really is straight and is just like super flamboyant and likes to wear scarves and like, you know, which I don't really think is the case. Because usually, like, I can kind of feel, there's, the cool thing about, well, I think anyone feels this, but like, especially with being gay, is like, I kind of know. Like, when I have a connection with someone, like I have a connection with you, Teal, but I know we wouldn't work out in the bedroom. You know, like I even think you're attractive and you're cute, but like I know, I just like, and that just kind of stops me from going. It's like, okay, great, like woohoo. But there's other times where I'll have that same attraction, but it's like there's a key and a lock and there's something that's working. It's like, yes, this is it. This is right.
Right.
So and that's usually, for the most part anyways, like worked out well for me, with the exception of what I believe men that just are so indoctrinated with this belief that homosexuality is wrong, that they're like denying who they are. And that's what happened with this kid. Otherwise, I'm sure I'd be dating him. But, and he was just like, it just felt like he was completely in denial. And like when I heard that, I couldn't even believe that. Like, wow, everyone, like all of my friends met him, and they're like, he's totally gay. Like, because he just comes off that way. It's just so apparent.
Yeah.
In who he is, but he's denying it, and it's so sad. It's like,
yeah, and there's what I usually tell men when they gather in a circle, and like I'm about to actually start a men's group really soon. The first thing I do to create intimacy and bonding amongst men is to deal with homophobia, like right off the bat, because one of the reasons why men don't connect with other men is because of that primal fear. And there's a lack of intimacy amongst men because they never broach the subject, the elephant in the room, the dark, toxic secret in the room, which is homophobia. They need to get clear if they're attracted to men or not. And there are some men that are attracted to men. There's a whole spectrum, right? There's some and this is another thing that I found in the queer culture. It's not very accepting of bisexual men.
yes, I agree.
There are men that are actually into both men and women. And if a man is still kind of like floundering and figuring out this whole world around men, and they're into women, and there's a lot of like trashing on that guy for like, well, I'm not ready to go with men yet, but like I'm into women. It's like, oh, he must be denying a whole part because he's like with women and he's not into men. Like, it's not either or. There are some men that are actually into both men and women, and there's a whole spectrum that goes along there in that department as well.
I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that.
And there's a lot of hurtful statements that I've seen gay men and gay women speak about their peers simply because they're into both genders. Like, oh, she's a pretender, or he's just pretending to be, he's just a visitor.
Yeah.
All this kind of stuff. It's horrible.
I actually always kind of idolized bisexual people. I've said this on the show before, but I've always wanted to be bisexual just because I thought that'd be so cool. You have so many options. You could be like, well, oh, look at that woman. I like her energy. Yeah, I'm gonna approach her. Oh, look at that guy. He's like totally different. I just think it'd be awesome, and I like. Part of me wishes I was, and maybe there's a part of me that is a little bit bisexual, but if it is like 3%,
But it's those inquiries, those questions inside us that I think keeps us human, keeps us real, keeps us humble, and keeps us from like doing the thing that we hated when other people did that to us.
Yeah.
I call it reverse. What is it? Recycled abuse. Like people internalize the abuser and they take it out on other people the same way that they got abused. The same way they got isolated, the same way they got, gypped. Now all of a sudden they get a right to do it. And the venom just keeps going from one culture to another, segregating instead of, yeah. We're missing being human together.
I agree. I think that one of the reasons why Oprah Winfrey's so successful is because she's herself, and she's not afraid to talk about her poop, and she's not afraid to talk about, a lot of very personal things that most people at her level wouldn't even consider talking about.
Right.
And the public likes that. They like to know that, oh, wow, she's real. She's just like me, and she poops, and she has, eating disorders, and great. Like, awesome.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and she's transparent a lot. I mean, we all have room to grow, I'm sure, but she's, for the most part, that's what I'm starting to discover is like a lot of the very quote unquote successful, whatever you want to term that, like oftentimes they're to some extent, one way or another, very committed to being transparent, whether it's in their music or in their acting. They learn how to
leverage their transparency.
Yes, there you go. I like that.
That's the success.
There it is. Yeah, that is true.
Yeah,
that is absolutely true. They learn how to leverage their transparency.
Yeah, and this is one of the key factors for empowering feminine energy is to learn how to leverage transparency, as a powerful tool to be a force in the world.
So can you explain what that is a little bit more? What does that mean to leverage your transparency?
Most people, because we live in a patriarchal culture, most people think of transparency as a weakness, as a thing to hide. We all live in a mythos in culture in America of John Wayne, of the Puritan culture, of the pioneers in the culture, where like you have to be tough and rough and stoic and hide your feelings, hide your emotions. You can do it no matter what. This is all part of the story, whether we know it or not, consciously or unconsciously, in most of our psyches. And so there's a kind of potency with transparency that lets people, just the very nature that most people don't know how to be transparent. If you're transparent, that's scary. Learning how to navigate those waters becomes this kind of potency and power in the world. It also empowers you in your life. Like if you're transparent in a healthy manner, you can get the help that you need. In fact, that's one of the first calling cards, that you have healthy transparency in your life. You get the support and the presence that you need in order to be a more fully functional human being. You have people that model it for you. You get to reparent yourself from the dysfunctional parenting that you might have had in your youth. You can get that in your adult life. You can pick your mentors, pick your friends, pick your community that you surround yourself with that has strengths and gifts where you find a lack of muscle and eyesight to see. They have eyes and hands to lift you up where you can't. You can consciously do that through transparency.
Power of being transparent.
It's amazing. It's an awesome power. I've been practicing it for over a decade now. And I say over a decade because, as a man in his 30s, I didn't even know I had emotions. It's been a little over 12 years now, a little over 11 years now that I've been really working on being more transparent, developing my emotional vocabulary. And I have to tell you, I am such a happier man for it. I am much more relaxed, much more at ease with myself. I have much more rich community around me of authentic friends, not colleagues, not people who I'm always having to pick up and support, but people who are really there for me when I need them. That's the power of transparency.
Wow. Well, that's beautiful. I want to say that if you listening really enjoyed what you have heard today, we really invite you to participate in a plethora of possibilities for yourself. First of all, I invite you to support this show by donating either monetarily, which you can do at realmsradio.net, or sharing this show on Facebook with your friends, telling your friends about this show. Also, if you would like some support in your relationship life, Tahil, of course, is the embodied relationship and intimacy coach.
Yes.
And you can get a free
introductory session on me, and you can sign up for that session on intimacyforumtraining.com. It's a place you can actually go through steps and sign up there for a session with me, or you can call me at 415-606-9268.
Oh, wow. Tahil, you're giving your phone number. Do you want to say your phone number one more time?
Sure. It's 415-606-9268. And, texting is a much better way to reach me than actually leaving a voicemail. It's just for brevity's sake and for simplicity. And just, let's set up a time in a day and let's get it happening. I would be more than happy to meet you.
They can also contact you from the website, right? From
Yeah,
intimacyforumtraining.com. They can
Yep.
contact you and get in touch with you that way.
Yep. I take because of my spacious lifestyle, I don't take more than 10 to 12 people a week. So there's a limited number and space, and there's usually openings, once every 3 or 4 months.
What a gift! What a gift that is. Yeah. You will be very grateful that you did it. One-on-one time with Tahil is worth its weight in gold.
Yeah, and it's truly a pleasure and honor of doing the work with people. For me, it is my heart's calling and my authentic joy to do that.
Wow. Well, we also want to know what you think of this show. So if you enjoyed the show, if you got something from it, what your favorite part was, you really liked when Tahil said this or that, the other thing, please let us know. You can email us, again, through realmsradio.net or intimacyforumtraining.com, through the contact pages there, and just let us know what you thought of the show. Because we want to know. We want to know questions you may have, ideas you may have, things that you're dealing with in your own life, whether you're straight, gay, bi, or somewhere in between. We are here for you. That's why we're doing this, and you are the valued recipients of our mission. So thank you so much again for listening, and we bless you now with love. And until next episode, who knows what will abound. So we will definitely see you then.
Thank you so much.
Realms Radio, where spirit rocks.
Realms Radio is sustained by listeners like you. Thank you both for contributing your time as a listener and your financial resources. Every dollar you give comes right back to this station, allowing us together to bridge a deeper awareness and connection to all of life and all of humanity. We also affirm whatever amount you contribute comes back to you tenfold in a multitude of miraculous ways. Thank you for your generosity and for supporting Realms Radio.
Would you like to receive empowerment, help, and healing from heaven and the angelic realms? Schedule your one-on-one intuitive reading with me, Tana Newberry, the Angel Gal, and hear from all of your heavenly helpers and loved ones in spirit. Whether you're seeking guidance about your career, your love life, your life purpose, or anything else that can bring you more peace and more joy, I am happy to help. Learn more about my services and how to receive a free consultation at my website, www.theangelgal.com, right here on Realms Radio.